I was in the field 320. Like, this is a number that I would always keep track of the days I was in the field. 323 days in 1 year was the amount of days that I was in the field. I guided. That was between guiding, personal hunts, and whatever. I was like, those other days were just travel.
All right. Well, thanks for being up here, Remi.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah.
That was an awesome tour. I've been wanting to see exactly like how you guys have been doing it. It's cool to see where it started too.
Yeah, it's weird because it kind of feels like we've been in here longer. And then when I say to somebody like we moved in January, I was like, holy shit, that's like not very long ago. No. And then I think I don't know how we fit in that building over there.
Yeah, that's pretty crazy. You look at like, I mean, I've seen when you're like, oh, this is where we do this, and I'm like, because you just don't know in your mind. You see like a product come out, and you just kind of don't know the behind the scenes.
Yeah,
that's cool.
Yeah, and what's exciting to me, you know, it's been an interesting challenge because when I made custom knives for forever, but it's one at a time, and nobody wanted. It was always really hard because I could never hire help for that because everybody wanted me to make it. Yeah, you know, and so it's not something you can mass produce. So when I started this. I'd never mass produced anything. And I say mass production, like we're not stamping things out super, super fast, but it's definitely a lot more production than as a custom maker. But I didn't know shit about like production at all. And so I was like, and then it's interesting because as a custom maker, you can like call a guy and be like, hey, how'd you do this? Or how'd you do that? And the knife community was actually really sharing. But when you're doing like production stuff, like you're not going to call some other big company and you're like, can I come look at your factory and copy everything you're doing? Yeah. So it was a lot of like figuring things out, and man, I made some mistakes, you know, but.
Well, I saw some of the machines down there. I'm like, how would, my mind was like, how do you even get started figuring this out? You know, it's like, yeah, that's so far out of my wheelhouse, but you look at it, you go, there's a lot to it.
Yeah. 5 years ago, I knew nothing about like those CNC machines.
Yeah.
Not a single thing. I didn't even know who manufactured them. And it's interesting because, like, the way we started, and that's where I always tell people, like, I really, truly feel like the American dream's still possible. It's just not easy, right? Yeah. But it wasn't easy for my parents or your parents or anybody ahead of us either. No. Like, every generation has its challenges. But, you know, I pretty much started with everything being out of house and then getting some parts in and assembling and then doing some, you know, just the final sharpening. But now we're starting to bring in more and more of those processes. And it's kind of like eating an elephant just one bite at a time. It's like, okay, well, now we're going to start on the leg here.
Yeah.
You know, so it's cool. But what's really exciting to me is I can see us bring in more and more stuff in house. And what that means is we get to hire more and more local people.
That's cool.
You know, because we got 24 or 5 employees now, and not this last Christmas of 22, but at Christmas dinner of 21, we took 2 employees to dinner.
Wow.
You know, so a year later we had like 17, and now we're at 24. So
that's really cool.
It's growing, but it's cool because it just feels like we're just now getting started.
Yeah.
Because over in that other building, I had no money, I had no machines, I had no help. And, you know, so it's like you don't feel like there's any way you're going to accomplish the goal. But now we're starting to get some momentum and some people know who we are, and then people helping us out like you. Now it feels like, okay, now's the beginning.
Right.
Now we really get to start growing. So,
yeah, it seems like, did it feel like it grew at like a pace, or did it almost feel like it was bigger than, like you were playing catch up, like, oh, it's bigger than I got to get to this? Or did it seem like you're like, you know, sometimes you build something and you're like, oh, now we need the people and whatever to follow? Or did it seem like it was kind of like building itself?
No, I mean, somewhat building itself, but it was definitely, I kept doubting it. Quite honestly, I was like, well, you know, afraid to invest, right? Because like I quit my job to do this. So then it's like, okay, I'm going to quit my job, which was a really, really good job. But then do I have the confidence to then also go invest money into it? And I was worried about putting my family at risk. And it's like, man, I don't know. So I was hesitant and slow to hire people. I was hesitant and slow to buy equipment. And I wanted it to pay for itself as it went.
Yeah.
And so some of that, honestly, I think people thought that we were trying to do like the super fast drop sellout thing as like a marketing gimmick.
Yeah.
But it was like, no, I can only afford to make 200 of these. I'm just going to make 200. And then after we did that a few times, like, okay, now we can make 300. But in my mind, I was like, I think we could make 1,000 and sell them, but then I'd have to go like more in debt. I'd have to hire people. And what if I make that 1,000 and they don't sell?
Yeah.
And that's always my biggest fear about hiring is like, what if we think we're going to do something and it doesn't happen, and now you got to let somebody go.
That's I think people, when they see somebody that owns a business or whatever, they don't understand the pressure of payroll. You know, it's like one of those things. You're like, okay, I need more guys to help with this, and as you get more, but then if that money doesn't come in to pay those people,
yes,
that's a lot of pressure. It
kind of hit me actually last month for the first time. I got a report on like how the quarter was going from our financial guy, and the total payroll number was there, and it was a lot of freaking money, and it actually like kind of worked myself up. Like I started feeling like queasy sick later, and I thought it was food I ate, and then I realized like, oh, I've been thinking about that for like 2 hours straight.
Yeah.
And I think I got myself like worked up. I'm like, man, it's a huge responsibility that like now we have to sell this many knives a month just to pay payroll, not to mention everything else. It's like, damn, this is a machine that's like starting to move that like you got to feed it. And it's nerve-wracking but it's also super exciting. And then I think to myself, well, we only have 20 some employees. A lot of the bigger knife companies have 400 or 500.
Yeah.
So like I say, we're only just starting.
Yeah.
You know, I'm just going to have to never look at that payroll number again.
Yeah.
But I'm sure it's for you too, like with hiring camera guys or hiring a crew to help out or film a hunt or whatever. Like, it's easy for people to say like, well, you should just hire help, you know, when they're talking to you and you're like, well, I'm super busy. And it's like, well, hire more help. And it's like, yeah, but then you're responsible for that person.
Yeah, definitely. It's a lot of, and even on the outfitting side or whatever, you know, because it's hard. One of the things like running an outfitting business is hard because it's seasonal.
Yeah.
But the good guys, like, how do you keep those guys year after year or whatever, you know, because it's very like without the guys, we have no business.
I was talking to an outfitter here a couple weeks ago, and he was saying that like he was actually trying to grow his business to a point and actually maybe find some hunting ground in other states and other times because up here in Montana as you experience, like once December 1st hits, there's nothing to hire those guys to do except maybe some cat hunting or something. But he was trying to figure out, because he had guys that he liked so much that like, how does he keep them until the next hunting season gets going? You know?
Yeah, that's the hard part.
When did you actually start your outfitting business?
Let's see. It's been, now I got to think. I'm really bad at fast math. I think I've run the bit. This will be my 17th year of owning it.
How did you get into? Were you just guiding, or
yeah?
How did you
I just started guiding, and then down in the Bitterroot here, and guiding every season. You know, I kind of started running a guy's operation because he started getting older, and I knew that I wanted to run my own outfit, but it was funny because my grandpa actually was an outfitter, but before, like, I was probably, I don't even know, a kid when he sold it. Okay. And the guy that he sold, so, you know, I didn't have, like, I was just guiding for a random guy that I started guiding in the Swan Valley. And then, and that same guy had a camp in New Mexico and a camp in the Bitterroot. Oh. And so I would go, like, you know, through each of his, like, we'd start first couple weeks in the Swan, then we'd go down, first couple weeks archery in the Swan, then we go down, do a couple weeks of archery hunting in the Bitterroot, then we go down to New Mexico, and then we come back up for the rifle season in the Bitterroot, and then we go like finish off a couple whitetail hunts in the Swan.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And then so I started working for that guy and doing that, and then one of the guys the guy that actually bought the permits from my grandpa knew that I was going to start taking over this other thing, and I'd built a pretty good reputation of being a good guide. And he's like, "Hey, I'll sell you the permits for what I bought them for in 1985." And I was like, shit. Deal, done. Because I'd been saving up, you know, to go out on my own. And so I originally thought maybe I would have taken over the one that I was working for, but was just a better deal. And that guy, he's like, yeah, absolutely do it.
Yeah.
And I still helped him out and kind of helped each other out. So it was good.
Now, how does it work in Montana? Did your grandpa have just an area where he was able to guide, or can you take those permits and hunt any area in Montana?
No, I mean, you like with you essentially have to have, like, because we do public land hunts, so we had to have Forest Service permits, and there's only a limited amount of Forest Service permits, and there actually won't be any more. There's always less. So like every time you don't use a certain amount of days, they just take them away. So they're just like essentially try to get back to nothing. I think I don't really know what their goal. They've got different uses and management plans, and as people come in and come go, whatever. But once you've got the permits, then that permit is like reissued to someone else. But there's not going to be more permits. So that way it like limits the amount of outfitters in a certain area.
So that might answer my question about when I grew up in Lincoln, which isn't far from the Swan.
Yeah.
They're in the Blackfoot Valley. And back then it seemed to be like there was a lot more outfitters. And maybe it's because I'm a little more disconnected from that area, but like the guy that taught me to build knives, Rick Dunkerley, he owned Mineral Creek Outfitters and outfitted they're out of Ovando going into the Bob Marshall. But it seemed like back then there was a lot more outfitters around the state, because I had knife collectors that would come to Montana every year and hunt. And a few things made that it seems like more and more difficult over time. It seemed like some of the wolves changed some of that, and then it also seemed like some of the regulations about how out-of-staters got hunting permits changed a lot of it. Are there less outfitters, you think, today in Montana, or is it just that I'm just don't know them?
I don't know. I kind of think that there are, because I think that like even where we're at, there is a lot more, and then over time, I think some of the guys got out of it, because it's not like a business. It's super easy to be like, hey, I'm going to sell this business, right? Because it's actually very regulated. Like you have to have 100 and something days underneath a outfitter and all this. There's like a lot of requirements.
Yeah,
and then it's fairly difficult business to run too. So I think that like what happened is a lot of the older guys just kind of aged out, didn't have anyone to sell to, or they kind of sold to somebody else that was already outfitting so they could get more days. Because everybody's like, you might only have X amount of days, which each day is one person on that land for that day, whatever. So you got 300 days. So that means you can take however many. So sometimes it'd be like a guy that's running an operation would just get the permits from the other guy.
Yeah.
And so it just kind of condensed some of it. I think that a lot of that happened in the Swan Bob area too, where guys would go out, like age out essentially, and another guy would just take on another camp. So like we're running it anyways, we might as well throw another camp in here. And so maybe like fewer overall outfitters, but maybe like the same amount of days or something. And then over time things happen, like, harder to get tags, who knows? And so they stop using as many days, and then there's fewer days and fewer outfitters.
I know in the Bob Marshall, the grizzly bears definitely became a bigger and bigger problem. I mean, they were seeing a bunch of bears back in the 90s when I was growing up there.
Yeah.
And literally 25 years later, the bear problem back there is like become, I mean, they were seeing bears back then in the early 2000s, the late 90s. They were seeing 3 or 4 bears a trip, grizzly bears. And that's in fairly thick country, but they're still seeing them. So I don't know how many were there then, but now 25 years later, it's unbelievable.
Oh yeah. Like when I remember, well, just growing up, like the Swan Valley was like the place to go kill black bears, right?
Yeah.
It was just like the easiest place to find black bears. It was just so many black bears. And then when I started guiding there, we did a lot of spring bear hunts, and it was good bear hunting. And then over the years, I swear there's like a time where it was like you would go out on a 5-day hunt and you would have 15, 20 grizzly sightings and maybe 1 or 2 black bear sightings, where it used to be the opposite.
Yeah.
You'd maybe see a grizzly and you'd see 20 black bears.
Yeah.
And it's like, I haven't hunted there in a while, but it's like I kind of stopped guiding in there in the spring because there's just so many grizzlies.
Yeah. I got a couple buddies that are very legit hunters, not really scared of bears, whatever. Well, they were hunting in kind of right north of Ovando, kind of in the area called the Boot Tree. And they got shoved out by grizzly bears. Like they had a grizzly bear harass them in their camp at night. This was archery season. They were actually just sleeping in hammocks. And had a bear just not leave them alone all night one night, and finally they were just like, we're out of here.
Yeah.
You know, it's just too dangerous, too thick.
Yeah.
Too many bears. What about with the outfitting stuff always really intrigues me because, like you said, it is a tough business. Like, you also have to, the area you're hunting in has to have good animal populations. Has to be good density of animals and whatnot to have like a high success rate. Because people will ask an outfitter like, well, what's your success rate?
Yeah.
Well, there's got to be animals there to have a success rate, but also the business side of it is such a challenge. You know, you see a lot of outfitters get into trouble because they take deposits, you know, for 2 and 3 years from now, and they start. I saw some of these guys in Lincoln live off their deposits, and they kept pushing things out, and then all of a sudden, it's like this, somewhat like a Ponzi scheme that like catches up to them, and they were doing their best, but like, well, I'm gonna use Bill's money to pay for John's food, and the next thing you know, they got a couple guys want a refund, and they're bankrupt.
Yeah.
but the amount of organization with animals, horses, all the feed, you know, all the gear, the tents, like it's hard work. I remember Rick hauling hunters in, like he would be the guy trying to get hunters in and out. You'd have to drive clear to Missoula to pick them up from the airport and drive them up there and have them all ride in. Of course, then they're saddle sore and don't want to hike the next day.
Yeah.
And it's just a tough business. And then to be actually profitable at the end of that. What's been your experience with like that outfitting, like the business side of it? Has that been the most difficult part, or is actually the finding animals and being like successful for the hunt the most difficult part?
No, the business side of it, like that's the part that it's more of a lifestyle thing. If you're into it, it's just like you just want to be hunting, and that's why you do it, right? It's not like I'm an outfitter to get rich. Maybe there's some that figured it out, but that wasn't my thing.
Like being a rancher.
Yeah, exactly. You're just like, hey, if I'm going to wake up and go do a job, I'd rather do that job than something else, you know?
Right.
Like, my dad was a painter. I hate painting.
Yeah.
It's just,
that's hard
my
work.
brother likes painting. But I was like, if I'm going to get up, you know, I might as well, it's hard for me to like want to get up early and go paint, right?
Yeah.
But like to get up early and go kill an elk with someone, sweet. I'll do that. I was like, that's what I'd do if I wasn't getting paid. So
right.
Cool. That's a way better lifestyle for me.
Yeah, for sure. How was it your grandfather then that got you into hunting, or was it your dad?
My dad got me into hunting, but I hunted, you know, like my grandpa got him into hunting, and then we would hunt together a little bit, and I'd kind of, you know, me and my dad, that was our thing. We'd just go out and do a lot of hunting together.
Where'd you grow up?
Yeah, in Reno, Nevada.
Okay.
Outside of Reno, yeah.
So how did you end up in like the Swan and the Bitterroot?
Well, my grandpa lived in the Bitterroot, and so I pretty much, like, ever since we were kids, we'd spend every summer with him. Yeah. And then during the summer, all we would do is like essentially scout, go around. Like I knew the Bitterroot better than anywhere in Nevada, really.
Really?
And then that's why. So then when I graduated high school, I just packed up my truck and was like, okay, I'm going to go get a guiding job at the Bitterroot because I knew it really well, and the opportunity for general tags and other stuff. Like I could guide in Nevada, but there wasn't that like consistent mill of like guiding jobs and opportunity, really.
Sure. How old were you when you started guiding? Did you
18?
Right, just left high school, or
Yep.
once you're out of high school?
Yeah.
Started guiding.
Yeah. I actually went to college, but I did it during the spring and summer semesters. So I took essentially what would it be like August through January off to guide.
Now, how did you go from guiding to everything that you how did that transition happen to everything that you're doing now with, you know, with the podcast and videos and everything that you're doing today?
Yeah, it was kind of like a long process in some ways, but I always liked filming too. So I kind of always filmed my hunts, and then I was also into photography. So I'd take, you know, really good photos, and then I liked writing as well. And I think the next step for me was actually doing writing and other stuff. There was a magazine here in the Bitterroot called Real Hunting Magazine. Mm-hmm. Some guys in Lolo, Hamilton area started it. And I ran into one of the guys I was out guiding, and they were talking, and it was back in the day when I used to have like a photo album underneath my thing, just like clients, they, you know, like if you're driving somewhere, you come back from the airport, they just flip through like, oh, this is cool, or just kind of like gets the stoke going, right?
Yeah.
And the guy was talking, and he's like, "Oh, something I don't know what it was." And I had a picture of something, so I showed it to him. And he's like, "Dude, do you do a lot of hunting, huh?" I was like, "Yeah, that's what I do."
Yeah.
And he's like, "Do you do any writing?" And I was like, "Yeah, I really enjoy writing, and I'd written some stuff for some other magazines, just And so I got hooked up with. He's like, "Hey, well, we got some." A magazine, we're getting started. I don't even think they had an issue out. If you want to help out, and I was like, yeah, I'll help out. And I ended up essentially like working for the magazine for like 40 hours a week for free. I just ended up designing the whole thing and doing everything for it, because I was like, I'm 21 years old, and I was like, I don't have a resume.
Yeah.
I was like, dude, here's my opportunity. And so I had like 2 or 3 articles in every issue. I designed the whole thing. I was essentially did everything for it, and unfortunately went under. Not my fault, but the economy crashed, and like a lot of things happened. Well,
that's probably in that time frame that the internet took over. So
yeah, I mean, like the economy tanked. Print media was going down. A lot of the big companies went under. That were like just the distributors went under, and so when they go under, you don't get paid. So you've got like it didn't work. But a lot of magazines went out then. But I had essentially a resume of like a crazy resume. Like nobody my age had that resume, right? Like here's all the things I'd done: design, edit, essentially like an editor of a magazine,
right?
With very little whatever, and just put in the work. Because I had that was like I had graduated college, and I had a lot of time in some ways.
What was your degree in?
Business marketing.
Okay. And
so I was like, okay. And I kind of, was able to factor a lot of that stuff in with the outfitting business and then the magazine stuff. And I started after that, I worked for Western Hunter magazine, just doing like field editor, just articles every month and all that stuff. And I continued to film, and we'd done some film stuff for the magazines and some other stuff. And then I saw this, I don't even know how I got on it, but the way that I've always done things is like, if I want to do it, I kind of felt like no one will ever give me an opportunity to do what I want. I just got to start doing it. Yeah. I was like, I wanted to do a hunting TV show. I had absolutely no clue how to do it, but I'd guided. This is like as a guide. I'd been the guide on these hunting TV shows.
Yeah.
And I'm like, dude, these guys absolutely don't know how to hunt. It's insane how bad some of these hunters were.
Yeah.
And I was like, man, how can these guys have a TV? Like, what are they? I just didn't get it.
Yeah.
But I was like, and also it was like a whitetail world then. This is a while ago. So you got to remember, like, they didn't put anything on TV that was like an elk episode to be like their trash episode.
Yes.
It's like elk or mule deer. Nobody wants any of that.
Yeah.
Like that didn't speak to me at all. I was like, okay, like great. So I just thought, I was like, I don't know how to get a TV show, but I bought a camera, and I was like, I'm just going to film stuff and like make my own show for myself. I don't care. Then I got like kind of like with the magazine thing, I'm just going to get the experience and the practice.
Yeah.
And then I saw this thing for, I don't know, it was like Solo Hunter. It was like, it wasn't even what ended up happening was Tim Burnett, a guy that started the Solo Hunter, he was actually producing another show, and they backed out of a time slot, and he didn't have anything. So he's like, maybe there's like some self-film stuff that we could use.
Yeah.
And I saw something, I don't even know where I saw it, internet something. And if you have like self-filmed or hunts, here. And so I sent him an email, I think. And I was like, yeah, I got hunts, and I listed all the hunts that I had filmed. And I think at that point I had probably 50 filmed hunts.
Really?
Including like a 220-inch mule deer that I shot in Montana, like a 380 bull elk, like all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
And
this guy's got to be like, who is this
he's like,
guy?
what? And so he's like, hey, I'm wherever. And we ended up living like 6 miles apart.
Really?
Like no clue. Yeah, just randomly. So I was like, well, I'll just bring it over to your house. He's like, sweet. So I just brought over all my tapes, and he's going through. He's like, dude, this stuff's great. And that ended up being like the first 2 seasons of Solo Hunter, just stuff that I'd already had that wasn't even planned on that.
And you were just self-filming yourself out hunting by yourself.
Self-filming myself, guided hunts, friends, just like filming everything.
Yeah.
And I still have like a catalog of probably 300 hunts that nobody's ever seen, just like filming so much stuff. Yeah.
There's your next YouTube series.
Yeah. We've been starting to go through it. It's just like finding the time to edit. I'm like, okay, we're calling it The Vault, and I'm just going to like, do 1 or 2 a month. I was like, it's just so much stuff to go through.
That would be wild, going through that and seeing yourself and just like I'm sure the memories that would come back, like a lot of stuff that you've probably totally forgotten about.
Oh yeah, there's
like small details about the hunts.
For sure. There was one I was like I didn't even think about it. I was like, when people saw a solo hunter, I'd been self-filming. The first self-filmed elk I killed, I think I was 18.
Really?
I was like a couple days off between guiding, took my video camera, like filmed the entire thing.
Really?
I just found that. Didn't even know that I had it. I completely forgot that I even filmed that.
Well, and the technology, and not that it's like the olden days, but the technology back then, like I remember when it was like, 1 megapixel camera, 2 megapixel, like this one's 3 megapixel, you know. The gear back then was definitely a lot different than today. And
way different.
Yeah. Image stabilized everything now. And the nice tripods we have that are super light. Gotta remember the tripods back then. Everything's like basically 3 steel bars, you know, holding up these tripods,
or like the plastic, and you would get it close and then it just move. Or I think the one that I'd filmed shooting the elk, I think I just used rocks to prop the camera up and
really
shot the elk. Like didn't have any of that.
That's wild.
It's
so cool. Like, well, you even talk about like starting off writing or starting off with like filming stuff and whatnot. It's kind of like I was saying, like with MKC, where like I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know how to do it. But I think that's where a lot of people like let that lack of know-how just stop them.
Oh, for sure.
And it's like, okay, well, I'm going to just take a camera out here in the woods and start trying to figure it out. And like, you're going to probably fail in the first time or two, but like you start to learn things and start to put it together. And the next thing you know, like, bam, you film something on, you know, that you shoot actually on camera and it actually works, you know, and it's just that like learning process. I feel like that so many people research so much, but they don't actually do.
For sure.
You know?
Yeah. That's one thing my dad always taught me. He's like, yep. He's like, just say you can do it and do it. It's like, if you have to do it, you will figure out a lot of stuff. If you don't give yourself an option not to figure it out, you really do figure it out. Yeah. And that's like kind of how I've done everything in my life. And there's like some stuff that probably almost got in over my head, but like, dude, if it takes me whatever, there's some stuff I was like, even with the magazine, I was like, yeah, no, I can put this together. I'd never opened InDesign or Photoshop in my life. Mm-hmm. And I just spent like the next 2 weeks, just like I found a guy that knew and like just learning it. And actually by the end of it, I'm actually really good at Photoshop just because I do it a certain way, you know. It's probably things have changed so much now, but like I gained so much experience just being like, yep, I can do that. Yeah, I'll do that. Yeah, I know how to do that. Like, yep, learn along the way. Yeah, right.
Yeah, and that's, to me, that's the best. That's really how it's going to stick, because you're going to also like, you're going to remember the time you wasted way too much time and failed at something, but you're going to really remember that and know exactly what to do to avoid that the next time.
For sure.
The print stuff I find interesting because, like, you just met my son Hank. Like, to him, everything's about YouTube and Instagram, right? And watching everything. But when we were kids, I mean, I'm a little bit older than you, but when we were kids in the 90s, late 80s and 90s, it was all about getting, like, I just remember how excited when the Cabela's magazine would come.
Oh, yeah. I had that thing. I was a magazine guy for sure. I had a stack of magazines by my bed. I never even threw away magazine. Like, I would read the magazine cover to cover probably twice. I put it in a pile, and at the end of the year, I'd go back and like read through all of them. Those Cabela's catalogs, I had everything dog tagged, earmarked. Yeah, never bought anything, but I really looked. Like, remember, you used to be able to buy like small boats and fish, like, crazy stuff.
Everything in there, because it really like came from like the Sears catalog era.
Oh yeah,
when we were like real young. But my parents remember, like, you could order a log cabin out of the Sears catalog. Like, it's crazy. Wild, you know, like you could order a house. Yeah. But with Cabela's, I remember, and we didn't have much money growing up, so I wasn't going to get any of the stuff I was marking. But I remember just like sitting there, like thinking about it and dreaming about it. I remember the first major purchase that I made. I was probably a sophomore or junior in high school, but I took some of my knife money and my lawn mowing money, and I ordered my first actual real set of binoculars. They were Leupold Wind River binoculars. But to me, like, I don't even know if I had binoculars at all. But I remember because my parents didn't hunt, my dad didn't hunt. So there was just a guy in town that would take me. And remember, he had Leupold binoculars. And I remember like being out hunting, and he would be looking and I had nothing.
Yeah.
And it really bugged the shit out of me. He'd be like, yeah, there's elk over on that hill over there. And I'm just standing there looking with my eyeballs, you know?
Yeah.
But the magazines, and same thing, I would keep the Cabela's. I would keep all of, like, I got Field and Stream, North American Hunter, maybe, was that one?
Yeah, that was one. They also had like the books too. I don't know. Did you ever get that where you like get this random book that you never paid for?
Yes.
And it would like come in, and then it's like
there's like a sticker club.
Yeah, and it's like send us like $10.99 a month. But you kept getting the books and never paying. I never understood the model of that, but
I
was like
didn't either.
Really weird because I have a collection of them still, and I know for a fact I never paid for them. So I don't know how that works.
It's the same. And I remember my mom being worried because she thought I was somehow paying for it.
Yeah.
She's like, "Did you sign up for a club?" I'm like
North
no.
American Hunt Club.
No,
And
but
you're
this
like,
is
"What?"
awesome. I'm in a hunting club.
Yeah.
I have no idea how that worked, honestly. I don't know if it was they got paid by sponsors based on their membership levels.
Because I think it was like this philosophy of marketing where if you send somebody something, then they feel obligated to send you money or something.
Because people were good back then.
Yeah, and it was like, yeah, and if you don't like it, you can send it back. And it was like, well, to send
That's
it back,
right.
you have to pay to send it back. And I'm like, wait, what's? But then there was like, you know, you could. It was a really weird system. Like you're just sending people free stuff, and then you're expecting them to then pay for what
To decide if they want it and send it back.
Yeah, you're okay.
Yeah. There was all that, and it's interesting because like I tell my kids like I'm older than the internet, which makes you sound ancient, but it wasn't that long ago.
No.
You know, but there was no, and I didn't really get to watch any video stuff back then because we had no, no internet, and then we had like 2 channels on TV. We had like WGN, you could watch a Cubs game or a Braves game, and that was about it.
Yeah.
But the print was huge, and I actually wonder, like, it seems like it's like that pendulum has swung back because I still, when I get a magazine, like you see companies now putting out more catalogs. Like I got the new Stone Glacier catalog, and I was like, damn, this is awesome. It's like you sit there and you hold it, and you it stays on like my intake. Like for some reason, I don't want to throw away, and it's just a catalog with stuff that you can buy in it, but I don't throw it away. But with everything that you see on Instagram and on the internet, it comes and then it's gone.
Right.
You know, and it's actually what's hard about content these days is if somebody doesn't see it in the first 2 or 3 days, then it just like gets overtaken by the sea of more content from other people. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's not very permanent. It just like disappears.
And it's interesting because I see Hank sitting around, like he'll be sitting around at night and he'll be looking at those magazines, and it's just I think there's still something to that people like to hold something and look at it and mark it for later, and you kind of sit and I remember going back and forth in the Cabela's magazine, like comparing things and reading the descriptions, and it's crazy.
Yeah, I spent more time on the Cabela. Like that was now it's like people scroll on Instagram, my time crunch thing. I just scroll through that catalog back and forth. I probably knew those things cover to cover.
Yep.
New one would come out. You're like, okay, now you got another. You like almost reset and find the things.
And then I would compare what things went up in price.
Oh yeah. I remember too. I would have all the Cabela's catalogs, and then there was that hardcover one. I don't know if it's like someone would have a hardcover one.
Yep.
Dude, how do you get a hardcover one?
Yeah, I think I had a buddy's friend that had one of those, and I think he spent a crap ton of money with them.
And then you get the hardcover. Yeah, I was like, can I have this hardcover one? And like, I think that I kept that. I actually still have that one. Probably, I think I just got rid of it when I was like going through stuff. Like, why do I have this still?
Probably a collector's item.
Yeah, I know. I probably should have sold it.
What I dreamed about so much back then, because it was the hunting I could do by myself, because where I grew up, it's kind of like where I am now. You can walk out from the back door and just walk to the river. So you could walk to the Blackfoot River, and there was a bunch of public land around it. And so I tree stand hunted a lot when I was in junior high and high school. And it's funny because I actually don't know how I survived it, because my dad didn't hunt. He wasn't anti, he just was working and blue collar guy and didn't hunt. So I think I got my first tree stand at a garage sale, but nobody showed me how to put it up. I kind of like did it around the bottom of the tree and somewhat figured out. But then I remember taking like big spikes out of my dad's nail shed and somehow hammering those spikes in a tree. And again, as a kid, I have no idea how I put that thing up in the tree and actually got it to stay there. Oh, yeah. And I think now, like, I would never let my kid go do that. Like, I have no idea. But I remember this was a homemade like steel tree stand. And I remember looking at those ones in Cabela's, at those like aluminum ones, and then the climbing stands. A buddy of mine got a climber, and I was like, this is a game changer. You can go anywhere. How old were you then when you kind of took over the outfitting?
I was 22.
Oh, so you were still young when you actually, you went from being a guide to an outfitter in a hurry.
Yeah, I think I was actually, at the time, as far as I knew, what I was told, I was the youngest licensed outfitter in the state of Montana.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. Now, how did you advertise your business back then?
So back then I did, it was, there was these, you do like the show circuit, right?
Yeah.
And I didn't, because the guy that I got it from had already like pre-booked, because that's how he did it. And so I had like all these shows that I had to go to the first year because it was like part of the deal kind of thing. I was like, okay, well, I need to try to figure it out. I don't think I booked a single hunter at any of these shows. But for me too, being like a younger guy, most of the outfitters were a lot older. So I was fairly versed in the internet. I built my own website, and I think at the time I had the best website out there.
Yeah.
Because I learned how to build. I was like, I don't have money to pay someone to build a website, so I just learned to build a website. And that helped. Like I had a pretty good website. But what really got my business launched, there was what was it? Something happened. It was mid-season. It was like right before opening day. It was maybe a week or two before opening day, and I got a call from a guy like wanting to do a filmed. Well, they were filming a TV show, and the outfitter that they were working for, like wherever it was, they didn't get the film permits. I guess the outfitter wasn't responsible for the film permits, but the production company was getting film permits, and they couldn't get the film permits, so then they couldn't film. And so he's calling every outfitter, like, can you do you have private land to hunt? I was like, no, but I can get film permits. And they're like, no, we can't do that. I was like, well, I knew the person. Like, it was just I was like, I work with this person. Like, I was just talking to him. Like, they said they can get you film permits. Like, it's not a problem. They're like, sure, okay, whatever. Well, you can get them in a couple days. And I was like, okay. So I called and got them all squared away, and they got the film permits. And then we were able to film. And so the guy came out, and we filmed the hunt, and it aired on Realtree Monster Bulls, which I think was like a pretty popular show. Mm-hmm. In the fact that, like, I think all the hunts that they had on there were $15,000, $10,000, like high-end hunts. And we just shot like an average, legal bull, 5-point bull in Montana. The hunter was a little bit older, and it was like we saw 1,000 elk that day. It was just like really good because, it's like had them all scouted out. Okay, we go in here and we're going to kill a bull, and we killed the bull. And the hunt panned out really well. Sorry. And then, so I was my brother drew a desert bighorn sheep tag. And so that was like, we did that. That was the opening week of the season. I think it aired would have been around like after the Montana, like first part of December, something like that. Mm-hmm. So we're sheep hunting. My brother shoots his ram, and we go back into this town, Beatty, where we're on our way back home. And so we're staying in the hotel, and my voicemail's completely full.
Really?
I'm like, what happened? Like, what the hell's going on? And I booked up, I think, 2 or 3 years of hunts within a day.
Holy shit.
Like, that show, like, essentially started my business.
And back then, was that hunt like $3,500
less? Yeah, under $3,000. Yeah. So they're like, dude, okay. Like, because I was like trying, and it's funny, like what, you look back, I look at like some of my first brochures, and I'm like, $2,500, fully guided 5-day hunt in Montana, and we were killing two, like if I had 2 on one hunt, so we'd kill like 2 elk, and we were pretty much 100%, 2 elk and 2 deer a week, you'd have 2 clients, they'd each kill a bull and each kill an elk, and you're like, food's included, and for $2,500, like you can't even hunt out of state anymore. Yeah, but $2,500.
But back then, you're thinking to yourself,
I was like,
that's like $5 or $6 or $7, $8 a week.
Yeah,
like
yeah.
But you're not accounting for, well, plus the cost of food, everything back then was way less. But,
right, but then you
think you're doing real good.
Yeah, and you're like, dude, I was making $50 a day guiding. You know what I mean? So I'm like, I'm making 10 times what I'm making guiding.
I'm clearing $200 a day.
Yeah, this is great. This is awesome. Yeah, so it was like just completely different. But I ended up booking, I think I didn't want to get too far out. So I think I just booked up like 2 years of guys. And then those guys were like, this hunt's insane. This is awesome. And it was just like repeat client. One of the things that I didn't want to do, like, I don't know, I'm in some ways, like I could have started my business, like calling all my old clients that wanted to hunt with me. And like, I'm like kind of old school in ways. Like, I'm not going to take someone else's clients. Like I had people call me and be like, I want to book with you. And if they hunted with me with the other outfitter, I was like, unfortunately, like that's that. And I called the other outfitter and I was like, this guy wants to hunt with me. So I was like, is that okay? You know, he's like, yeah, that's fine. You know, and I like gave him a commit, like whatever. But that's how I started. And then the show happened and I got all my own clients, and that really helped me. And so doing that, then I started getting like, then it was just like repeat. It was just like, okay, cool. Those guys would just repeat. And now, I mean, I've got guys that have hunted with me 15 consecutive years this year.
Yeah.
So,
well, and then once you started getting your articles and your other videos started coming, then obviously that I'm sure started really feeding into that to where you pretty much had to be turning people down at that point.
Yeah, imagine. Definitely. Yeah, we turned a lot of people away, and it was like, well, we got people, we don't even have room,
right?
You know, which is a good place to be.
Yeah, for sure. That's what's, you know, it's, to me, that's what makes your content, especially like with your podcast, like listening. And I love the way you do the hunting stories, how you always refer something, not always, but a lot of times you refer back to a hunting story and you remember something. And like, maybe you're talking about spring bear hunting and how do you find spring bear on a deep snow year, you know, or it's a late winter or whatever. And so how are you going to find bears in the spring when there's lots of snow or something like that? And I always like how you refer back to hunts you've been on, and you've got this catalog of experience, whether it's your own personal hunting stuff or people you've guided, you know, shows you've done and stuff, that it's like an endless amount of ideas and content for stuff that you can talk about. But it's what really makes it adds so much credibility to what you're doing in a day and age where there's like somebody with a big following around every corner on the internet, right. And you can't, I see it in the knife community, quite frankly. There's guys that are legends that never really latched on to and I'm sure outfitting is the same exact way. There's guys that maybe were 40 when you started that are now in their 60s or 70s, and they didn't embrace the internet and they didn't embrace social media and whatnot. And they've maybe got really good outfitting areas and stuff, but they're not real good at getting their content out there. But then you got another place that they're not real great. They're totally unprofessional, whatever, but they do a great job with their content and they've got all these followers. And it always bothers me that a lot of these younger knife makers that are getting into it don't know some of these old legends just because they're not, frankly, followed big time on social media.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, you see that with everything. You're like, oh, there's somebody, and it's like, whatever, they're good at that aspect of it, right? But like me, I've never been... It's kind of weird to say because you're like, oh, well, you do this professionally, like you're out in a public eye, I guess.
Yeah.
But like that was never my goal is to just be hunting all the time, honestly. Right. And it's like, okay, that other stuff came with it. But like for me, I'm the type of person that, like, I couldn't sit there and have a podcast and tell someone how to hunt if I didn't think that I had the most experience possible. Right. Like it's just not for me. But I feel very fortunate that I've got to spend hundreds of days, probably at this point, thousands.
For sure,
of days.
Thousands. Yeah.
I mean, like, you know, there was a year before I was married and single, and I was in the field 320. Like, this is a number that I would always keep track of the days I was in the field. 323 days in 1 year was the amount of days that I was in the field. I guided. That was between guiding, personal hunts, and whatever. I was like, those other days were just travel.
Yeah.
I mean, that year I guided in South Africa. I guided in New Zealand. I guided in Montana. I hunted. I guided in New Mexico. I guided in maybe South Dakota. I can't remember. No, not South Dakota. Where else? Yeah, just and then personal hunts, filmed stuff, you know, and it's like by the end of it, you're 323.
Wasn't it you I was listening to that went to New Zealand and just kind of like bailed off into it, didn't have really any experience or as far as like over there, any help or whatever, and you just kind of like learned it?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I pretty much bought a one-way ticket and showed up. Yeah, I ended up like getting contact with this one guy who was going to help me out, like at least, you know, I was going to start working with him or for him or whatever. And he ended up it was a really weird deal, but he ended up like dropping me at this place. And it's like a new place that he was going to guide on. He's like, here, figure this out. I have to go do some stuff. And I was going to buy a vehicle. And so I was like, literally got picked up from the airport, dropped off at this house. And then he's like, hey, while you're here, I was like, just trying to find odd jobs. He's like, hey, I'll clean this house out. Like, we're going to do whatever. So there's another guy there, and we're mucking out this house, and he's like, put all these beds in here and do this and whatever. So I'm like working on this house, and this guy, the landowner, comes up, and he just loses his shit. He's like, what are you guys doing? Well, the guy that dropped us off was a terrible communicator. He didn't tell this guy what was going on, and now we're like here at this house, and this guy's pissed, and so he's like, whatever. So he's like leaves. And so the guy that was supposed to come, the plan was, he's going to drop us here for a day. He's going to come back, and he's going to take us into this town where we can buy a vehicle.
Okay.
Right? So I have some wheels. So we're like, I have no clue where I'm at. Like dropped off at this like ranch. The owner's pissed.
Yeah.
And we have no food. And the
Really?
guy doesn't show up for a week. So
Holy
like
shit.
we go over to the guys, like we walk to the owner's house, and I like ran into him again. I'm like, hey, how's it going? But he seemed like very unfriendly.
Yeah.
Because he didn't know what was going, like, right? Like it was just this whole thing, and no way to communicate to anyone. And I'm like, hey, do you care if we, eat those apples? He's like, yeah, no problem. Like whatever, yeah, apples, fine. And there was like some honey and some like margarine in the cabin. and so we were just like living off these apples, and like I've had apples, I can't even eat apples anymore. Like for a week we were just eating apples. We were like cooking up apples as like margarine, like we make like this like almost like candied apple kind of thing. We were just eating apples, and then it was probably like 5 days in, the guy's like looking, he's like, man, these guys really like apples. And so he mentioned something. He's like, hey, you guys really like apples, huh? It's like, no, this is all we've got. And it dawned on him, like, we didn't, like, it was just like this weird thing. He's like, you guys want to come over for tea? And I didn't know, like, at the time, I'd never been to New Zealand. Come over for tea. I thought he meant like sipping tea. We're like, yeah, sure. Yeah. And he like puts down food, and we are just like destroying this food. And it comes out that like we don't have any food, and he's just like, holy shit. So he starts like, he's like, no, here, like gives us all this. He's like, oh, we got lamb and all this stuff. And then finally the guy showed back up, and he's like, you just got dropped. I was like, yeah, we don't know anything.
What the hell did the guy say when he came back? Were you guys like, bro?
Yeah, we're like,
where'd you go?
Yeah. Like, what's up? He's like, oh, I had some stuff came up. I'm like, okay. But like no phones, nothing like that. Like,
well, that's the thing. Like there were no cell phones.
No. And then so, yeah, I got a vehicle and like just started figuring out the hunting stuff and doing tar hunting. And then my thing was I really liked that like backpack hunting. So I just found some places where I could start going and learning, and then it was pretty easy to get jobs because like a lot of the hunts over there are like high fence deals, and then the free range stuff's the tar hunts. But guys that wanted to do a tar hunt, like for those outfitters, it was a kind of logistic pain in the ass to then go do like a backcountry hunt, right?
Yeah.
So they would essentially like I would just work, and I'd just be out there, and then they'd drop guys off. I'd take them tar hunting, come back. It was pretty cool. And then I learned a lot out there, and I worked there for I think 13 years. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Jeez, just kept going back every year.
Yep. Yeah.
That's awesome. Have you been back recently?
Yeah. As soon as they lifted the COVID thing, that was last year, May, I think it was, or something. Shortly after it opened, my wife and I went. We took our daughter.
How did you find a wife with being in the woods 300 and some days a year?
That's a good question.
A woman to put up with it.
I did like all my like woman searching 1 week during the Reno rodeo, and then during that time between like the 2 weeks around Christmas. And I actually met her like 2 weeks around Christmas at a pizza place. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. And then I was like, we started dating, and I was like, hey, I go places. And she's like, oh yeah. And I was like, yeah, I'm going to New Zealand. And I just like, you want to go? Oh, we just started dating. I was like, you want to go to New Zealand? She's like, yeah, cool.
Really?
Yeah. So she came to New Zealand, and yeah.
So you knew right then she was the adventurous
Yeah, I was like,
type.
perfect.
That's like when I met my wife, Jessica, I kind of tried to sabotage it from day one because I didn't think it. And I was divorced. I had 4 kids. Life was super busy. I had no interest in the whole dating thing. And I was like, she's way too cute. She doesn't have kids. Like, this isn't going to work out. So the very first time I talked to her after I met her at a bar one night, the next day when I talked to her, I was like, well, I'm building a barn. I'm off recovering from back surgery. I'm trying to build this barn before I have to go back to work. If you want to come out to my house and help me build horse feeders, I'm building horse feeders in my barn all day. And she was like, yeah, it sounds good. And I was like, really? Seriously? And then she came out and she lugged 2x10s around all day. We built horse feeders. And I was like, this chick actually, like, this is kind of cool. She actually like can maybe hang, you know?
That's
so
cool.
yeah, as it turns out, she had grown up with horses and done stuff like that and loves doing that kind of stuff. But yeah, it's cool finding out right in the beginning that they're into some adventure.
Yeah.
Speaking of adventure, can you tell the story about your wife? Was it your wife? Was it you that lost or she got lost or?
Yeah.
And I remember you telling the story on Rogan.
Yeah.
But I don't remember the exact details, but I want to kind of hear it again if you don't mind.
Yeah. I mean, the kind of like the abbreviated version would be, like me and my wife dated, then we kind of broke up, you know, it's like a little bit different life, you know, like she was younger than me. So I think it was probably, and I don't blame her, it's like, you know, I kind of was pretty set in my like life path. And
you mean 300 and some days a year in the woods wasn't good for a relationship?
Yeah, for sure.
They don't like it when you're like, I'm sorry about your feelings, but I'm going hunting.
Right. Yeah. So we separated, but, you know, kind of stayed in contact a little bit. And then she ended up moving away and then moving back. And we had plans to like kind of meet back up. And then I was in Alaska doing, I don't know, bear hunting or something, and came back and got a call from her sister that she was missing. And I was like, okay. And she was just curious if like we'd been talked or whatever. And so I found out where everything happened was outside of Winnemucca, Nevada, kind of. And so I immediately like loaded up my stuff, drove out there, met up with search and rescue and stuff. And it was kind of weird because they had like dogs. They sent dogs out. Dogs went up, came back. They had like all kinds of weird working theories. But my initial thing when I got there was like, all right, they were pretty apt to let me help. There had been helicopters out, searching, and they just couldn't find her. And now at this point, I think it was like going on it was the night of day 2, so it's like, okay, you're going into another, like there, it's like pretty high elevation, and so you got that high desert swing where it's like 100 degrees in the middle of the day and like near 40 degrees at night or something like that.
Yeah.
So
well, and you're getting into towards day 3, like water becomes a real problem.
Water, the whole deal. So you're pretty worried about like, okay, we got to find her. And then the one thing that I noticed was like search and rescue is 500 yards out of cell phone service, right? Like their base camp. Like, why would you have your base camp here and not down there? I'm like, okay, like any updates? Like it couldn't get any updates. If somebody found something or whatever, it's like somebody would have to go and whatever. But, you know, so my thought was this. I was like, and they had like this assumption. And then my thought was, well, whatever your assumption was, it didn't work. So I'm just going to go off my own assumption. My own assumption is she's not here, right? Yeah. Like right where you've been looking.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to go do my own thing.
And how far off do you think they were? How far off did they end up being?
Quite a ways off.
Okay.
Yeah, because they were like, oh, she's probably within a couple miles. And I was like, well, if she trains for marathons, like she could be 20 miles away. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
You know? I mean, honestly. And then the other thought was like, they were like, oh, on the trails. And I was like, we've hiked all over the world, never on a trail. Like she's probably not afraid to go off trail.
Okay.
So that was kind of my assumption. Was like, I essentially went in, it was getting dark, I went to the furthest place possible that you could get like on a vehicle. And then just like, it was getting dark and I just looked around. I was like, I'd probably go up there. That looks cool. And started walking up that canyon. Now it's dark. And I think I was hiking for, I don't know, at this point, well, whatever time sundown is and that time of year, it's like June something. So it would probably like dark at, I don't know, 10 p.m., something like that. And then around midnight, I kind of like stopped walking. I literally was praying, like, I'd like just find, because you're so much stuff's going through your head. You're like, okay, we're gonna walk up on a dead body. Like you just don't know. You know what I mean? Like you just, I don't know. I was pretty shook up about it. And then literally praying for a sign. I looked down and there's like, it's a steep hill and there's like no moon, complete black headlamp. Look down and there's like some scuff marks. I'm like, okay, but there's tracks and deer and whatever.
Yeah.
So I start following that, and then it just leads it in the sage and hill and scree and all that stuff. And there's like a little bench, and I just got this weird feeling. I'm like, okay. So I don't know what it was. And then I see a light up on a ridge, like a ways away. So I can't remember. I think I just marked to the spot on my phone, or I can't remember what I had. Marked the spot where I was at. And I decided to go to the light, see, like, maybe it was somebody with night vision, because they were going to get some night vision FLIR stuff. And I was like, that'll probably help. But I wanted to have it when it was cold in the morning, so it's like you can see the heat, because those rocks really like hold the heat.
And
they're bright. Exactly. Yeah. So it's like, wait until it gets cold, because they're getting pretty cold. And so I walked there, and it happened to just be some people like camping. Like it was a weird place to camp, but they were just out recreating, and they didn't know what was going on. So showed them a picture, whatever. And then I just had this feeling. I was like, I got to go back to that spot. So I hiked back to that spot, and it was probably half a mile away, and get there and like just sit down and just yell like, Danielle, this is Remi. If you can hear me, I'm not leaving till I find you. I'm just like sitting there in the dark, and I hear Remi, and I'm like, oh,
no shit. It gives me chills.
And I'm like, but I also was like, it was so faint. I was like, did I just make that up? You know?
Yeah.
So I get on my radio. My brother and friend were there, and I just like radio. I was like, hey, I heard Danielle. I'm turning my radio off. Get somebody up here, you know? And like just turn it, because I didn't want like next time she yelled out, be like a radio going off. So I just turned the radio off and then started going in a direction I thought it was. It was a big like basin. So it could have been like across the way, whatever. So I'm just like trying to run like in that direction as quiet as possible, like tiptoe run kind of, you know, when
so
you're like
can
stock
hear.
running. Yeah. Like in the dark, no moon, nothing. And I yell out again and hear again, and she ends like 300 yards below me, and then go down, and she was pretty out of it, and got the, you know, rescue medics and all that stuff up there. And my brother came up, my friend ran down to go get like, you know, search and rescue. And then, got her out. And
did she say anything when you came up to her? Was she coherent?
Not super coherent. Like I think she thought she was hallucinating. You know?
Probably
like,
so.
Oh, what? Like,
was she super thirsty or cold, or what was her condition?
Yeah, all of it. I think like because she was just in, what was it like? I mean,
like legging type,
like, and a light t-shirt.
Yeah,
or like running. Like I don't even know if she had like a, you know, something you'd go out.
Had she just gotten lost?
No, I think she was not feeling well, like going out. I think just probably overexerted. I don't know, like a lot of foggy details, really, you know, but I think like you know, like not feeling well, overdoing it, waking up, not knowing where you are.
Yeah.
You know, like,
so once
stay there.
Once
like,
she got recovered, were you like, okay, now you have to marry me?
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You owe this to me.
Yeah.
Because no other chick's going to put up with me.
Exactly.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate you telling me that.
Yeah.
I remember hearing it on Rogan, and I couldn't remember the exact details, but even when you were telling me again, like I got chills when you told it on there.
Yeah.
And it like gives me chills every time of like what that would be like, because like you say, you're literally at the point of praying and having pretty much knowing that by morning, like all hope's just about lost another day, and it's probably not good.
Yeah, and that's like the not knowing. I think I was like more nervous about the not knowing thing, you know, like not like I don't know, not knowing what's going on. Like it's a horrible feeling
for sure.
I never want to go through that again if I can help it.
Yeah. So to kind of wrap up here, I got a couple questions. One, with all the hunting you've done, everything you've gotten to do all over the world, what is your favorite animal to hunt?
I mean, well, anytime I get a sheep tag, I'm pretty stoked about that. But it's like pretty rare opportunity. I really like hunting mule deer with a bow early season.
Spot and stock.
Yeah. I think like that's, I think honestly, like mature mule deer with a bow is probably like the most challenging, or one of the most challenging. I love elk hunting and calling elk, but like I don't necessarily need to be the one shooting the elk. Like I love taking people elk hunting.
Yeah.
You know, like it's a weird deal. So probably if it was like, oh, you can only hunt one thing, it'd probably be mule deer.
Really?
Yeah. I just think like the challenge of it's pretty hard. I was talking with a buddy the other day. We were scouting, and I'm like, you know, I feel like elk for me, I could probably go most places. You know, I mean, not like to be like braggadocious or whatever, but I've been on a lot of elk kills, right?
Yeah.
And like I know, like elk are fairly predictable and other things. Like I could go into a lot of general units and find elk. Now, not saying like a big bull, but like go in and kill elk like pretty much most days.
Yeah.
And like like you do it enough, you really figure elk out.
Right.
But like mule deer, like a general area for mule deer, and like maybe it's because I'm more picky with mule deer, but to like find a mature mule deer, some of the hardest, like there's an area that I've hunted, and it's like I'll go in there. I've gone in there for 4 years. I shot one big buck, and 3 of the other years I didn't even see a mule deer buck.
Really?
Right? So it's like, I mean, for me, like that's a very hard challenge, you know? So it's like, I don't know. I find that like very appealing to me.
Do you find your best way of finding those mule deer bucks is just high point and just glass? Just do you sit and just do a ton of glassing? Yes
and no. It depends on the type of area. So like open country, absolutely. But then there's like those general units that are like, you know, general Montana, Idaho, whatever. I mostly am hunting like more timbered country, and that's, I think, why I don't see them. But I also know that like nobody's hunting deer there because it's just like low density, right? So it's like a low density animal. That's the thing about elk, is like even in lower density areas, it's like they might be a herd of 20. So you got to find the herd, and then there's a bull. But like mule deer, it's like a low density area, so you got to find a deer,
like a buck and a doe.
Yeah, right.
That's it.
You got to like find the deer, and then it's like a time of year when they're kind of hiding, anyways, like early October or whatever. So you got to find the deer, but in those low density areas, there's a little hunting pressure. So my philosophy is like, you go to an area where there's less hunting pressure and they're hard to find, then you get age class. And when you have age class, if you have like maybe decent genetics or good feed that year, you're going to find a bigger buck, right? So I'm finding like deer that other people haven't seen. And then it's in an area where there's age. Because I think with mule deer, the hardest part is just get them old enough. It's like hunting a 5-year-old mule deer and hunting a 2-year-old mule deer are 2 completely different animals.
100%.
You're like, oh, mule deer are really easy. I was like, yeah, certain mule deer are really easy.
Yeah.
And it depends where you're at. Like if you draw a limited entry tag in some of the areas around here, especially, it's like they're super dumb. I don't get it. Like, how are they even surviving?
Exactly.
Because they get dumb fast. But then there's areas where I've hunted, and it's like, it's so hard to get close to them. So, you know, I think like that's kind of my strategy, is like find those places where they're hard to find the deer, and then the odds are in your favor that it's got age, and by it having age, you know, let genetics be what they be. And doing that, I've taken like a lot of really good deer in areas that, you know, probably don't get a lot of harvest success. But because of that, you might go 5, you know, it's a game of like 5 years of hunting, see one deer, you know, I've seen like 4 bucks in the last 5, you know what I mean? It's like that one deer, you know, is a big deer.
Right.
Something you wouldn't find somewhere else, maybe.
Right. Yeah. Do you with the mule deer, I lost my damn question. I had a question in my mind and I lost it, Henry. Yeah. Well, the one thing I will say about mule deer is, like, when I was hunting them down in Arizona, the comparison between mule deer and elk is elk will actually tell you where they're at a lot of times. And with those mule deer, like with mine, we spotted them, and then I took off. You know, they were 1.5 miles or 2 away, and I take off hiking up in there, and down there that you can use radios and all that stuff, right? Well, I get halfway up in there, and then they're like, "Hey, your deer are up feeding." Okay, I'm gonna just keep making ground, and I get up in there a little ways further, and then they radio me, and they're like, "I think they rebedded, but they're gone. Like, can't see them." And so I worked my way in there super slow. It took a couple hours to just go like. When I got to where I thought was within 150 yards of where they were, it was like one step and glass like crazy. One step and glass. I mean, I did that for an hour before I found one of the small bucks bedded under a tree. And to me, that was super cool. But like in Montana, in that like mountain type hunting, timber type hunting, once they walk up into that timber, and you start walking up in there 10 minutes later or 20 minutes later trying to find them, They can be in any direction, behind any bush, any tree. Like, that's so hard to do compared to if they're bedded down under a rock and you know exactly where they're at.
Yeah.
That's a whole different ball game.
I do like my favorite mule deer hunting's like August in Nevada, high country, where it's like bedding, like you're essentially like in sheep country, bedding these velvet mule deer bucks, and you get like that perfect stock scenario where it's like bedded buck.
He's dead.
Sneaking in, just got to be super sneaky.
Yeah.
Right. Like it's still hard, but it's like that. I like that. No, like I get that adrenaline rush from like creeping in on a deer that can hear everything, and you're in real dry country, and you like just cannot make a mistake.
Yes.
Like one little thing wrong, you clip your release on your string the wrong way, and they're out of there.
Yeah.
So you're like, everything has to be right, and you got to make the right approach, and the wind out. And it's like, I like that anticipation of like this stalk that's like a very mountain lion-esque sneak, you know?
Yeah. We went as a team here last week and watched that full draw film tour, and one of those hunts, you know, they come in right over the top. Well, I think it was South Cox. Come in right over the top on a rock. They're bedded up against a big rock wall, and he was 3 yards from that deer because he was right on top of him.
Yeah.
And literally the hardest part was getting to where he could shoot because the deer was laying underneath the rock, and he's literally just like shooting straight down under his feet. And quite honestly, could have probably just jumped off the rock with a knife on the deer. But like you say, that's what made me think of that with the mountain lion type hunting.
Yeah.
But in his socks, moving just so slowly because, like you say, the slightest little brush up against something and those deer are gone, and they're just laying there on alert completely.
For sure.
The cool thing, I had never hunted down in Arizona, and the cool thing about hunting that hot country like that was I was learning how the guide was telling us how you're going to set up to actually glass into the sun. Mm-hmm. You know, we set up at 10 or 11 in the morning in an area that by 2-3 in the afternoon we're staring straight more into the sun as the sun's going to set. But at a certain point, those deer are going to stand up and rebed on your side of the brush. And that's stuff that that's just different than like high country mountain deer hunting in Montana.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Cause if you're looking into the sun, then you're also looking into the shade as the philosophy. I remember one of like the first videos I made, you know, people just like don't know anything, like make comments. And it's like one of the first comments I was like, this guy's an idiot. You shouldn't watch these videos. He's looking into the sun. I'm like, dude, you've never hunted mule deer in your life. I guarantee it. And
he was right, man. It was crazy because we were glassing there for a couple hours and not a single deer. You're glassing around looking and whatnot, and then all of a sudden you look back to the left where you'd been looking for the last hour and a half, and there's a giant deer standing right in the middle of it.
Oh, absolutely.
And he had just gotten up as those shadows started to move around the brush. He had just gotten up, milled around for a minute, peed, ate a little bit, and laid right back next to the same bush, but on our side of it. And now it's like, oh, now it's game on. And it's wild when you glass out across there for 2 hours. You're like, there's nothing in this country.
Yeah. I think I can't remember the exact number, but I kind of like wrote down all the deer that I've shot or guided to or mule deer like with a bow. And the vast majority of them we've killed like middle of the day. And it's because of that like scenario where you watch them in the morning, like they go in bed and then you've got that time to sneak in, or you've spotted them rebedded. Like for me, bow hunting, I'm most successful like middle of the day.
Yeah. 'Cause right before dark, when you would kind of think most people kill animals, you know, especially with a rifle, that's when they're active, they're out feeding. But if you're standing there with a bow and he's got 5 or 6 does and a couple small bucks with him, you're not getting close to that deer. Like, I mean, unless you can somehow put yourself in their path and get lucky that he comes along before everybody else. That makes a lot of sense with a bow, that it is the middle of the day when they've bedded and you've had time to make your stock. And, or they've finally exposed themselves by rebedding. It's the other place I love doing that kind of hunting is like in the Missouri River breaks. You know, that country's just so cool. Yeah, compared to over here, it's just different. Yeah, like that broken country. Oh. That's what this year I'm hoping to get a little bit of time to chase mule deer over there during the rut because I haven't done that in since I was a kid. I'm the same. I'm really hoping to get some time over there, but I've taken my kids over there during rifle season, and we've had good success. They've all gotten pretty decent bucks, in the rut there with the rifle. But I've been my boy and I'd love to just go over there with a bow. Yeah, it's rifle season, but I think if you spent the time, you could definitely go over there and have success. But you got to find them and, like we were talking, like try to put them to bed.
Yep.
But again, that country's so loud to move in if it's dry. And if it's wet, you're screwed anyway.
Yeah, you just can't get around.
Can't walk. But yeah, well, so speaking of time, this fall, I was texting you here a few weeks ago, and all of a sudden you text me back and you're like, dude, I just drew, 2 sheep tags?
Yeah, well, I drew a desert sheep tag,
Desert sheep?
And I actually had already drawn a Dall sheep tag in Alaska as well.
So you've got 2 sheep, and then didn't you draw a good deer tag too?
I did, yep, yeah.
So you've got a busy damn fall.
I do, yeah. Yeah, I've got it's like essentially a dream season, really. It's like the desert sheep tag is the tag that it's an archery tag, and I'm really excited about it because that's been something that I've been really wanting to do.
Are you going to put a bunch of time in the summer scouting, or?
Yeah, I did. I've been scouting a bit. Some of it though is like, you're scouting so far out. Like I'm not necessarily, if I was to scout, it's more like learning the unit than trying to find the right ram, because there isn't necessarily a right ram. I'm not like looking for this one ram that has to score this certain. I'm just looking for a mature ram with my bow. But I want to know where the highest concentrations are and like how to get in places and stuff. So I'm more spending time like just learning the unit really than like looking for, if I was like, hey, I've got 2 days, I could go to one spot where there's a lot of sheep and like look over sheep, but I'm not interested in that. I'm just like interested in knowing the canyons and where, the habitat and stuff like that. So when it's, 2 months from now, 3 months from now, I can get in there and know where I'm going.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, that's super cool. Well, I appreciate it. The other thing I noticed, you guys just dropped a bunch of Live Wild merch.
Yep.
That's all new, right? Or
yeah, it's all new. Yeah, we haven't had that we've been asked for a long time, and it's just one of those things. I'm like, I'd rather go hunting than figure out how to make hats and T-shirts. Like honestly, but I think too, it's like it's cool to have something where I've done those kind of things with other people or other companies, but I've been kind of working on that stuff, trying to build a little bit more of a brand and something that isn't so dependent on me personally, because like I said, as you get employees and other things, there's a lot of pressure to keep a business running.
And it's nice.
A lot of it's been on me forever. So
yeah, and it's also nice to have something when your little Shopify goes off and it's 11 o'clock at night and you're watching a movie and it's like, oh, I made $10. Like it's kind of nice to have a little bit of that mailbox money or something coming in when you're not actually actively having to work for it every second.
Yeah, definitely. And we'll have other products and things coming out here in the very near future. So
yeah. Cool. Well, I'm super excited to be working with you. As one of our ambassadors, it means a lot. It's especially with your connections to Montana and just how legitimate as a hunter and person you are. And then obviously, you've got a big name in the industry with a lot of respect there. So means a lot that you're willing to kind of sign on with our company. I know we're new to the space in the last few years. So I know reputation is super important, especially to somebody like you that's taken 30 years of building it. So means a lot to have you kind of on the team and helping us grow our brand. So.
Well, thanks. I appreciate it. And I'm excited to work with you guys too. I see what you guys are doing and the stuff that you make. And it's like, yeah, that lines up with what I love to do. Love to hunt, love things that are really well made and high quality. Because, I'm the type of person like obviously I use hunting stuff professionally. Like you're using it every day. It's like I know immediately what works, what doesn't. It doesn't take long to figure it out, So now something you're like, yeah, this is built for what we do. That makes a big difference.
And a lot of the kind of hunting that you talk about, I mean, like the backpack style hunting, like that was my big thing all along, was I wanted to make knives that were for that hunter. That was like, you don't want to carry extra weight and extra bulk. And, even like the little hatchet that we're coming out with here, I tried to make a hatchet that, like, if you're car camping or you're wanting to use it around your house for your campfire, like, there's probably better hatchets out there, that are heavier and bulkier and split wood better. But if you're backpack hunting for high country mule deer and you want to set up a little spike camp and have a fire, like, I want to make tools for that guy that he can actually legitimately carry to camp, a hatchet that weighs 14, 15 ounces, versus something that weighs 3 pounds.
Yeah, definitely. That's cool.
Yeah, so the kind of hunting you do is exactly like where I'm trying to design knives for people just like you. So it's much appreciated that you jumping on and helping us out.
Yeah.
So.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for having me. It was good to talk and meet up. It's been fun.
Well, it's cool that you drove up here from the Bitterroot, and I'm surprised you tell people it's the Bitterroot. I figure you'd be telling people you're, hunting over in Idaho or Bozeman.
Well, I tell people you think that's where I'm hunting, right?
Yeah.
It's not where I'm doing my personal hunts.
Yeah. That's what I made a post when I was over in Bozeman last weekend. I posted a really pretty picture of the landscape, and I was like, the Gallatin Valley is beautiful. You guys should all move here. There's nothing to see on the west side of the state.
No, people ask where the best place to hunt is. It is around Bozeman. Biggest bulls, I mean, it's got a bull factory called Yellowstone Park, and when they move out of there, dude,
it's true.
It's the best. I mean, you look at, that's where you want to know where all the big elk come from, right there.
There you go.
Biggest elk in Utah came from right there, right? They just transplant them all the other places. That's the genetics, man. Right around the Gallatin.
There you go. Go hunt there.
Yeah, good spot.
All right. Thanks, Remi.
Yep, thank you.